So welcome everybody, and my name's Joyce Dalgleish, and if you don't know me, hello. I work in the data division at Scottish Government, and my job has a sort of interest in all things related to change and innovation in the public sector related to data. And the event today is a collaboration between Scottish Government Data Division and the Data Lab community. And that is something where you will have either you'll be a member or this is where you found it and you've signed up to come along today. So this event today is part of the Data Lab's data visualization. They've got data there. They've had a data visualization theme month with lots and lots of events and a competition too. So it's all been very exciting. So you think, why does Scottish Government get involved in this? And well, I'm going to tell you why. Because it's an opportunity to showcase with everybody like innovative uses of data and technology in the public sector, which some people don't realise that lots of exciting things go on in the public sector. So it's to kind of raise awareness of that. It might also help inspire you and spark ideas around what's possible in a public sector context. So maybe you've been thinking about doing something, but you didn't know it was possible, you know anybody else was doing it. So this is a chance to kind of listen into what some of your peers are doing. And sometimes, you know, it's in Scotland, sometimes it's wider. And also something else I think is important about a community is that actually there's a reassurance here that we're coming together, we're remembering that we're all part of the same national picture. And so if you've got a challenge, chances are somebody else, myself, wherever, somewhere across the public sector is experiencing the same. So it's a kind of a bit of saying, well, you're not alone in this. So that's kind of why we do it. Now, I'm going to go on just say a little bit of housekeeping. So in true sort of flight attendant fashion, this event's going to be recorded or is being recorded. So cameras and microphones are switched off for that time. The recording will be made available by the Data Lab. They have a YouTube channel and you'll get a link to sort of rewatch and share this. So please do that. Add it into your festive viewing. Any questions that you have, put them in the chat. And I'd rather, if possible, put it in the chat rather than Q&A, just for simplicity, simplicity being for me. And we will pick up as many questions as we can during the time. And if there's anything that we can't do in the time, then we'll try and do something afterwards. And we will share the slides and material on the Data Lab public sector community. So for those of you who are already members and getting the newsletter, you'll see it there. If you're not a member, then please do join. And Stephen, I'm sure we'll put a link in the chat so that you can sign up from there after you've heard from our speaker. So the speaker today is Frank from ONS, and he is doing a presentation on dashboards and the very interesting topic, if everyone is doing dashboards, how can my one stand out? So it's been one of our most, oh, there's no, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, just before I go on, Kevin, that's fine. It's ideal that you have no Q&A function. So the chat is where we want to see your comments and views. So sorry for the interruption there. So data viz is a really hot topic in amongst public sector colleagues, particularly in the data analyst and statistical communities. So this has actually been, I think, our biggest event yet. No pressure, Frank, but this is our biggest event yet. So yeah, I am going to stop talking and hand over to the person that you're all here for. Frank, over to you.
Thanks so much, Joyce. Right, let me just go through this technical exercise again. Right.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. And
here we go.
Okay. Right, you should be able to see this shortly. Yeah. Just loading. There we go. Are we all good? Can we see that?
It is, I think, slowly loaded. Yeah, the slides have appeared for me, so I take that as a proxy for other people too. So fingers crossed.
Nice one.
Yeah,
all right, thanks.
Thumbs up.
Cool. So, well, firstly, thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to talk to you all, and I think, you know, I've been at the ONS a while, and this is my favourite part of the job. It's like doing outreach and talking to people, and you know, leaving my bubble a little bit of the kind of, you know, ONS like sort of public sector statistics. So yeah, lovely to be here. So everyone's doing dashboards, and how can yours stand out is what I want to talk about today. And I've got some particular views, which might resonate with some of you, maybe not, but we'll see. So yeah, I'm Frank Donnarumma, and I'm a principal data visualization specialist at ONS. Um, so a bit about me, I've been at ONS for about 12 years. I absolutely love it. I've spent most of that time working on and leading on data viz, so like making charts, maps, interactive products for our website and beyond. But I have also worked in stats production. I've had some brief stints in social statistics and even economic statistics. So I'm not a stranger to the data production side of things, but my expertise are in data visualization. And really importantly today, I'm technology agnostic. So I don't mind what you're doing. I don't mind if you're using a piece of chalk and the pavement. You can be using pencil and paper, or you can be the best coder in the world. It doesn't matter. Technology doesn't make great content. People make great content. So it's the thought processes behind what we're doing that really is going to help us. And I'm going to talk about that quite a bit. So if you're on this call and you're not a great coder, don't worry. You can still be really successful in disseminating data, and you can have a good career. Because I'm not the best coder in my team. Let me tell you that I'm by far not the best coder, but I still find myself useful, hopefully. So some principles then, we're going to go through these one by one and talk about them in detail, but I've just sort of summarized them on this slide here. I've got some principles for good dashboards. So getting started then, first of all, your dashboard needs to be appealing. So they tend to work best, or we've had success at ONS when dashboards address broad topics, particularly pertinent topics. Things like the economy in a time of economic unrest or uncertainty, things like a coronavirus dashboard in the time of a pandemic. There has to be a really strong emerging need, and we can build dashboards to address these things. At ONS, we have this problem of hundreds of teams kicking about, all creating their own little corner of statistics. And they've all got their own little workflows, their own little publications, their own little data downloads. And there's not a lot of cross-cutting going on. There's not a lot of bigger picture going on. And we're definitely guilty of this at ONS. So dashboards can bring these disparate information together, these disparate statistics, and sort of compile them in terms of topics and in terms of bigger umbrella discussions, which is a really healthy thing to do. And it's not something we've been great at historically at ONS, if we're being honest, but we're kind of addressing it in recent times. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be appealing, and there has to be demand for it, because publishing and maintaining dashboards is it's no small thing. There's going to be data pipelines, there's going to be a lot of decisions to be made, there's going to be kind of a lot of work behind it. You're making yourself a big old hamster wheel to keep turning. So it's got to be justified with some strong user need. So a really good example of this, I've said it already, but it was COVID at ONS. So this was an overwhelming user need. Overnight, you had hundreds of publications across government that were talking about kind of, we had multiple different measures of infections, hospitalization statistics, death statistics, all emerging all at once. And, as I said, it wasn't just ONS with lots of different publications, it was cross-government. It was horrendous, this landscape of unnavigable kind of overwhelming statistical outputs. So we really wanted to bring that together in a really citizen-friendly way, and hopefully we achieved that. This was actually the most read product on the ONS website in the history of the organization by several orders of magnitude. So it was a huge deal at the time, and it probably had me working morning till night for 2 years, and I'm still suffering with the PTSD from that, but I won't trauma dump too much, but it was definitely worthwhile. So dashboards also need to be flexible, and we found this a lot at ONS. Our priorities will change, and so should the content in your dashboard. What's in the news right now? It changes every day. The focus should be different, and the focus of your statistics should be different. What questions are being asked by our users? The government of the day will change tomorrow or the next day or the following day, and their agenda will be different to the previous government, and they'll be asking different questions of the data. And things will happen in society, in the economy, which will demand different things from our data. And just what's interesting about the data today, that changes all the time. And sometimes we need to be faithful to our data and say, right, well, what about this month's publication or this quarter's publication? Is there anything interesting that we can drill into that people might not have known about? And then, that's the data side of things and the user side of things, but also how resilient is your dashboard? Think about your workflow. What if data formats or technologies change and the rug's pulled from underneath us and this happens? And then thinking about people, if we're building a dashboard in R Shiny or Python or D3, and then our resident expert, who's an excellent coder, leaves tomorrow for a promotion or a different job or whatever, what are we going to do? Are we left in the dark? Are we left panicking? That's an important consideration, and it's happened. It's happened at ONS. How quickly can we add, remove, reorder, or repurpose content in our dashboard? Sometimes they can be complicated things to code up or to kind of build, especially with pipelines in the background. And then we're kind of stuck with this one structure or stuck with this one format or one sort of set of data that we're showing. That's not necessarily a healthy thing going forwards. It needs to be flexible, and we need to be able to respond quickly. So my lesson here is that don't be technology led, be technology enabled. So really do that thinking about what your dashboard is doing today, and then let technology help you achieve that. So thinking about being flexible again, at the start of the pandemic, it was all about infections and hospitals and deaths. Towards the middle of the pandemic, it shifted. It was vaccinations and antibodies. That was a really nice time at the pandemic, actually, when the data shifted from being all about kind of this sort of disastrous statistics to this kind of actually are we clawing our way out of this thing? And then towards the end, it was about the kind of the fallout. So what was people's behavior? What was well-being like? What was the impact on the economy? So it stopped being about health and it started being about more the sort of society side of things. And then people stopped caring. Of course they did. The pandemic slowly dropped out of the news. It wasn't top of the agenda. Russia invades Ukraine. Suddenly the news cycle changes. People's priorities change. And that's another important thing, actually, is shelf life. These dashboards, they can be big, they can be unwieldy, like I say, a big hamster wheel. It should have a shelf life. Are you updating this thing forever? Or is it going to just responding to a certain need for a set amount of time? It's good to know that going into these things. So they take a lot of resources. Accessible. So accessibility is an enormous topic, and it covers so much. It's an enormous umbrella term. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but making things accessible can be difficult. But there is some really low-hanging fruit that we can do, that we can achieve to make our content more accessible. And I really think the biggest one is simplicity. So making charts and explanations really, really simple, using plain English, catering for all users, short sentences, avoiding technical jargon. This is really critical, and this is going to help your dashboard travel. It's going to help people stick around when they arrive at the page. So yeah, and don't think of it as dumbing down. I think sometimes at ONS, our more experts can think, oh, I don't want to dumb it down. You're not dumbing it down. It's naive to think that even government ministers are experts in the area of policy that they're in charge of. Often they're not. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means we need to format things simply. So visibility then, it needs to be easy to read. It needs to be inclusive for users with, perhaps even disabilities like, color blindness, poor vision. So, think about don't overuse, too many colors. Let's try and keep things with a decent level of contrast. If we are using colors on white backgrounds and text on white backgrounds, and then decent font size as well. We see things go out with tiny, tiny font, and that's no good for anybody. And don't think of these things as, specifically for people with disabilities or short-sightedness or whatever. These considerations help everyone. Um, and that there are the more technical principles as well, such as alt text behind things, and tab indexing for keyboard navigation, screen readers, and all the rest of it. The more kind of getting into the weeds of the HTML of a thing. Um, I'm not the foremost expert in the world on these things, but I'm familiar with them. And I do know that off-the-shelf things, you R and Python and your kind of open source dashboard creation stuff isn't good at this by default. So it can be quite a lot of work to get things technically accessible. Navigability, how are people traversing your dashboard? How much interactivity is needed? Are you using lots of tabs, buttons, drop downs? These aren't necessarily healthy things to have. If you're hiding things behind clicks, that's bad news. Linear scrolling is the only real interaction that we can reliably know that people will do. So, be really careful about hiding things behind clicks and overly leaning on interactivity. It can be a burden. Compatibility. So we're talking about now like different screen sizes. It's got to adapt to mobile devices and things like that. I know at ONS, our statistics on this are incredible. So it's sort of like it's pushing more than 60% of our users are accessing our content on mobile devices. And we know this from our kind of web metrics that we collect. So that's an incredible burden on us to engineer our content to fit on those sorts of devices. And again, thinking about how overly complicated is your chart, how much interactivity are you using? Scrolling, people scroll. Think about your favorite apps, your brain rot apps, TikToks and Instagrams. You just swipe, just swipe. That's all we want. And then a really, really important one for me, one of the biggest ones is mobility. What I mean by that is, make your content in your dashboard so that it can leave its natural habitat. I've got to be honest at ONS, and I've got to be honest with my colleagues and say, look, the ONS is not people's lunchtime read. A lot of people don't even know we exist or what we are. So we need to engineer our content so that it ends up on the BBC, so that it ends up in the Daily Mail, or on Twitter or on Facebook. And sometimes in our dashboards, we lack that context, and it can be quite dry, and it lacks that sort of liftability. So yeah, self-contained things with journalistic titles, source information, stuff like that, that's static as well. Static charts do well and travel well. Our dashboards should be curated, and this is a lot of that. So before we even touch any code or any sort of pencil to paper, we need to be really thinking about what we need to show and why. Do we need to show every little bit of data we produce? Often we don't. At ONS, I always argue with with my stats producers. At some point, users can just download the data and make things for themselves. You can't cater for everyone with your dashboard. We have to draw that line somewhere. And I think the temptation is just to use it as a dumping ground for all of our data. And I don't think that's a healthy kind of culture. I think dashboards should really be curated, and we should really, understand our user needs and just give them what they need. And yeah, take the burden of searching for relevant data away from your users. And the only way you can do this is by having dialogue with your users and understanding their needs, and also just general situational awareness. So we've already talked about it, what's going on in the news, what's the policy agenda of the day, what's going on in the economy, or just what's interesting about your data. And then finally, pruning it. Don't let it grow out of control. Don't let it just sort of become an unwieldy thing. We should delete or relegate content that's lost relevance over time. Pruning your dashboard is as important as adding new things to it. So again, on curation, it requires a lot of human input and a lot of research, prioritization exercises, and vigilance above all. And we want to be curating our dashboards to more directly answer users' questions. So, and this shifts the burden from our users, and that's a really important word, I think, burden. You know, that burden should be ours. It should not be our users. Let's shoulder that burden for them, and then we're doing our job. So I've just included this chart. It's a beautiful chart from The Economist here on the right. Obviously, this was in a newspaper, or on the Economist website. They've done such a lot of data engineering here and thinking about how they present this data. So this is Greenland ice melt over quite a lot of years. When did that start? 1981, so a good few decades then. They could have shown every single line of that data. They had every single line. They could have put that on that chart. They could have made it interactive, but they didn't. They've distilled it. You know, they've said, well, what do users need to know? Let's do a normal range. Let's do an average. Let's do some churning, some milling of that data, and let's color it blue. Let's think about the color we use. Let's label it. Median. 80% of readings fall within this range. And now let's have that latest year, 2019 at the time, and let's color that red. And then, you know, it really pops. It's such a beautiful use of color. That's kind of hot cold association. And then the title. I'm not advocating that people in public sector statistics use puns as their chart titles, but a descriptive title goes a long way. You know, on thin ice, that's memorable. And there's a lot of evidence that these sorts of chart titles really improve recall of your charts. So yeah, definitely make your chart descriptive, that title descriptive, and not just a dry representation of the data. This is why we have subtitles and footnotes for that nerdy stuff. You know, squirrel it away. Let's be more journalistic about what we're doing. And this requires thought. This requires constant vigilance and constant manually authored content, which people are terrified of, because people want, senior managers want things automated. They want to be able to save money, save time, and it's naive. Yeah. Moving on then. So, oh yeah, this is a beautiful poster. Some of you may have seen this if you're sort of in the sort of data viz kind of sphere. But this is something called the visual vocabulary. So dashboards don't always afford us a lot of freedom if they're highly automated, or if our chart choices are limited. But choosing a chart for a given bit of data is a real skill, and it should be really nuanced and really considered. And picking that right chart is so important, and it reflects our users' priorities, and it reflects the questions we're being asked. And this post is just great. We have this enormous printout of this in the office down on the south coast of England in ONS, and it's too small to see, but I recommend you go and take a look at it. But it's got all the sort of different relationships in data that we might see. So magnitude, correlation, distribution, part to whole, spatial, flow. And then below it's got all sorts of different examples of charts that we might use to bear out those messages. And it's just a really helpful aid. And I know this was really helpful for me, particularly when I was kind of career young in data viz, and the right chart choice wasn't always immediately apparent. You get better at this the more you do it. But yeah, lovely thing that. And I don't like to tell people to go and do further reading in any of my presentations that I give. I do a data viz course at ONS and for wider government, which is a whole day thing. I don't like to make it a kind of nerdy academic pursuit. It shouldn't be. It's an art form, and it's conversational. But if there's one thing you go away and read, it's this. This is an inspirational blog for me anyway. It's by a chap called Nathan Yao. You might have heard of Nathan, but he says, ask the question, visualize the answer. And what he does in this blog is he takes a relatively simple kind of population data set and he charts it 30 or 40 ways. And it's incredible. And it really goes to show that just really, really subtle choices in the way we chart things, in the choices we make, can really engineer our data, our charts to answer different questions and sort of surface different facets of our data set. So yeah, really, really inspirational, that, and some really nice little techniques and ideas that you might pick up from it. Our dashboard needs to be insightful. So it's not just a dump of data. So often at ONS, we think of our charts as a means of publishing data. They're not. Tables, data downloads are a means of publishing our data. Charts are a means of talking about it. You know, they're a visual vocabulary. We're not trying to give people data to the nth degree of accuracy with a dashboard or with a chart. We are trying to tell a story, and we need to keep that in mind. So good dashboards will add context to the data. You know, it's what are they doing over and above just a data download? That's an important question to ask. You know, contextual things like even a bit of brief commentary. You know, what are the implications of our numbers is really important to get on our dashboards. So a great dashboard is actionable. That's such a great word, actionable. By looking at your dashboard, can a policymaker or any other user, you know, maybe it's a policymaker in Whitehall, maybe it's an inquiring citizen worried about COVID, and they make a choice based on what they're seeing. That's so important. So for every number in your dashboard, ask yourself, so what? So why am I putting this in here? Who's it benefiting? What's the choice being made off the back of it? And engineer it to better answer those questions. So I've got just a nice example here. I love this chart so much. So you know, there are really simple things we can do to add insight. And I don't know if any of you are in government statistics on this call, but a few years back, we had a national statistician called John Pullinger. And I liked John. I thought he was a good chap. And all the national statisticians have a little catchphrase that they bring with them. And John's was a good one. And it was better statistics, better decisions. He argued we need to get closer to our policymakers in Whitehall. You know, the ONS needs to have them on speed dial and them us and kind of, you know, we really need to be part of the decision-making process. And that was a nice thought. But, you know, sometimes you'd hear John talk about this stuff and you'd go, well, what do you want me to do? When I go back to my desk, what do you want me to do? What tangible thing can I do? And this is it. So, you know, thinking about this chart, is it journalistic? Is it memorable? Is it relevant? Is it actionable? So female representation then in the Federal Senate of Brazil is going up. We could publish that chart. It's a faithful representation of the data, and we might think job done. And this is often the kind of charts we find in dashboards. Just dry, you know, cookie cutter, here's the data, pick the bones out of that. But there's a lot more we can do, and this chart's such a good example of choices that we make. So I've said it already. I say it several times every talk I give because it's so important. A journalistic title. Despite steady progress, female representation in the federal Senate remains low. It's a double-edged sword. It's going up, but we're still not where we should be. We're still not anywhere near equality. We can manipulate axes if we want to introduce white space or get rid of white space. You know, we can make certain variables seem more important or less important, or, you know, and I think this is a really good example of that, is where actually introducing that white space tells the story better than the previous chart because, you know, we're seeing it going up, but it's still kind of a drop in the ocean. And then really, really crucially, we can annotate. And if we're being really brave, which we don't often do in government statistics because we want to be impartial, but, you know, we can put government policy on charts. You know, what a great thing to do to help decision makers and to help hold government to account. It's really great. So this one, we've got the UN suggested minimum proportion of women, which is a real world policy. You know, some experts have thought about this and we're still not there. So yeah, it's rising, but we're still not there. And never mind absolute equality. You know, so this chart has gone from just a dry cookie cutter representation of data, which we so often find in dashboards, to a beautiful storytelling device, a journalistic piece of content that we would happily tweet or find, you know, in social media, in the Daily Mail, on the BBC, whatever it might be. It's a self-contained piece of journalism, and it's not rocket science. Nothing we've done there is difficult. There's nothing you couldn't do there with 5 minutes in Excel. So yeah, bear that in mind. Where are we now? Fast, yeah, just your dashboard needs to impart information quickly. So keep information short, give high level information, prioritize that information. Consider your dashboard a jumping off point. this is something that we're constantly battling with at ONS. Our dashboards need to be a summary. They really need to be what we might call like a shop window. Um, they're an aggregator. They're not an everything machine, I sometimes call them. It's fine just to show the top level things and then fire off to your more detailed publications, your quality and methodology information articles, whatever it might be, the more nerdy stuff, the more in-depth stuff. We've got publications that do all that, but they're just disparate. And the dashboard can be a summary, and then it can be a navigational aid, and that's a really good function of a dashboard. And then, like I've said it already, I'll say it again, keep interactive content to a minimum. Try to produce charts that, convey information in a way that doesn't require that burden of clicking, of hunting through drop downs and so on. Take that burden away from the user, do that curation. And yeah, mobile, I think I've mentioned it already, I'm repeating myself a little bit. But yeah, just consider how the content in your dashboard is going to be surfaced in different media. So, maybe that's news media, maybe that's social media, maybe that's even a different publication within your own organization. I know at ONS, we will make charts in GDP publications, for example, and then we'll have other publications which are like a roundup of economy, the economy. And you might want to lift a chart out of one place and put it in another. How easily can you do that? It's really healthy to be able to do that. And yeah, like I said, static charts work best for this kind of purpose. And then a huge one, this is absolutely, don't underestimate this one at ONS. This keeps me up at night, is sustainability. So when you build a dashboard, how easy is it to update? Can all staff perform that update? Does it require specialist software? Does it require specialist staff with specialist skills? Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's easy. Hopefully it's documented. How frequently do you update it? Is it your priority? Are you going to be taking yourself away from being able to be more responsive in other ways? I know at ONS sometimes we like to write articles about, if Donald Trump raises tariffs on the UK or something, we need to respond to that. And if we're too busy turning that hamster wheel, are we going to be able to create that more bespoke content? We need to keep, one hand free at all times to respond to emerging needs. Automation can help, but it's harder than you think. This is something I'm always going on about to senior managers. Think about everything I've spoken about today about good practice with Data Viz, making things journalistic, manually authored chart titles. Can you automate that? I don't think you can. I think it's naive. So yeah, really important to keep in mind. You're not going to automate your way out of these problems. These just require hard work. And yeah, simple technology where possible with good documentation. So that's sort of coming to an end, but just one dashboard that we have created in recent times that is largely automated that I am broadly happy with at ONS is our weekly deaths dashboard. And this met a set of criteria and which made it a really good candidate for dashboardification, if that's a word. It had really consistent data every week. It was a very, very simple data set with very simple charts. It was quite limited in its scope. We didn't need a huge amount of context. The pandemic, not over, you could argue, but wasn't the top of the agenda. Deaths were relatively stable, had been for a while. But we did have some users that wanted this data surfaced, consistently, and a number of important users. So we thought, well, we can pop this in a dashboard. And we do automate a few things. We like to have these sort of big numbers these days, kind of what's the key number? How many deaths were registered? Let's get that number front and center. And let's do a percentage change, percentage change on last week or the same week a year ago, whatever it might be. You can automate these things to a degree. And then a chart that's automated. What you see there, the blue bar is the deaths and the black outline is expected deaths. So what we do, we like to see the number of deaths against expected. If there's a big difference between the two, then something's going on. So yeah, we've been able to automate that, and that's been quite successful, and that's sort of freed up a bit of resource rather than doing a weekly bulletin that's really manually authored. But the there's not that many releases at ONS that I would want to give this treatment to. Like I've said, so many things require a lot of being really on it and really understanding your data, understanding your user needs. So I'm being careful with this. This is a success story, but we can't just go and apply this to everything we do at ONS. Again, it would be naive and it would be shooting ourselves in the foot. Finally, then, if you are in government statistics or even any, creation of statistics across, wherever you work, the code of practice for official statistics backs us up. The OSR and the UKSA who produce this, they're quite clear with us that we need to be disseminating our data in such a way that it gives insight on key topics and it's relevant for a lot of users and it's accessible and it contains data visualizations. So, I love this because it keeps me in a job. The ONS can't sack me because there's always this paragraph in the code of practice that says we need to be doing charts and we need to be doing them well. So it's kind of my reason for being, if you like. Yeah, and I think that's about it. I will stop sharing now, and I haven't looked at the chat at all. I've just
You
been chatting
don't,
away.
Frank, don't worry. It's been very busy on the chat.
Okay.
And so while I'm going through these questions and I'm going to pick them out. We're not going to get to all of them. We're only here till
Okay.
12:50, people, and I need to do a couple of bits of wrap up at the end, including a little reminder about our Data Viz competition, which I mentioned earlier on. So I'm going to pick out a couple here for you. And sorry if I don't get to you if you put a question, but I'll do my best. So we have a question from Natalie. Now, you do, Frank, I know, talk about government statisticians, but I know from this call and some familiar faces on the call that, or names at least, because we can't see people's faces. There's lots of NHS people here as well, which is my own background in which is now Public Health Scotland. And Natalie from Public Health Scotland, I assume you're still there, Natalie. We publish a quarterly report that contains static charts at a Scotland level. We've started to use a dashboard to give the reader the option to select their NHS board and the specialty that they're interested in, so we need some interaction. What types of interaction would you suggest we use within a dashboard to make it as simple as possible, or should we be going back to the drawing board?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think we had some experience recently about an NHS survey that was being run in England, I think, and it was about people's interaction with the NHS, and that had health board level data too. And I think it's fine to have a drop down or have some way of drilling down into your data if you can demonstrate a strong user need. But I think if you could do it in a way that is, maybe you could use what we call like a small multiple chart. So you're kind of a chart, but like multiple panels that address each kind of area of Scotland. Can be quite a nice thing to do. And then not only have you presented everything, you can kind of rank those panels as well. So you can go from highest to lowest, and you can see stories start to emerge in that way. Or maybe you've just got too much data to be able to do that. But yeah, a drop down is fine if you can justify it. I would also say, when we're going down to these sorts of levels, I know like confidence intervals can be a thing if your data is survey derived. So it's really important to be talking about these things as well in a plain English way and presenting them as part of your chart. So yeah, any way we can surface that is good. But interactivity it's not the devil, it's not, don't avoid it at all costs, but just try and minimize it and try and make it really kind of obvious what you want users to do. And then another really nice thing to do is show an overview to begin with, and then let people drill down. Let them at least come away with something before you require them to interact. Hopefully that's a reasonable answer. But yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope so for everybody on the call. Now, Alice has pointed out, and it did scamper through my mind as well, that a lot of these tips seem like great advice for statistical publications in general. So what do you think is the difference between a static publication and a dashboard, and when should you choose one over the other?
When should we choose one over the other? Yeah. I think when there's a really strong justifiable user need, and particularly when we have data where we allow individuals or organizations to see themselves within that data. So again, interactivity is not it's not the worst thing. It can be really useful, but we should always bear in mind like what are users wanting to see with that data. So maybe you're a council area and you want to compare yourself with the country average. Maybe you're a person with a certain income and you want to compare yourself with your sort of the average income for your age. People want to see themselves in data, and then again keeping it actionable. So yeah, we can certainly allow people to drill down into data, but then that data should always have a kind of so what factor. So maybe it's being compared to a target, maybe it's being compared to a kind of historic average, whatever it might be. Try and contextualize it in some sort of way, and make it helpful and actionable.
Yeah.
But yeah, but in general, I really like statistical articles. So, us kind of going about our data presentation in a journalistic way. And yeah, I think most of what we're doing should be that sort of content.
Yeah, I mean, this is not in the chat, but there was something that struck me as you were presenting was just that consistency of reporting, which a lot of us um, have to do, where we've got to report on policies and targets, and how do we
Mm.
manage to keep that flexible? And it sounds to me like having some articles may be a way of bridging those two.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult when the landscape's always changing, but yeah, it can be healthy to have. Sometimes it's a frequency thing. So I know at ONS we have what we call real-time information on the economy, which is a weekly publication that looks at kind of GDP adjacent or GDP correlated stuff. And we get all this data from kind of various different sources, and we try and give an overview of what's going on in the economy, like a finger on the pulse. Um, and then we will have our quarterly and our annual GDP, which are like they're the gospel, right? They're the official numbers that, they're much more robust, and the calculation process for them is a lot more defensible and a lot more official. So sometimes you could argue that maybe that weekly thing could be a dashboard, maybe that high frequency kind of right finger on the pulse. We don't have to go to town journalistically on that. Let's just keep it nice and accessible and kind of upfront. And then let's let those quarterly or annual publications focus on that deeper dive, on that more official kind of stance. But
Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's something we've done. Yeah.
That's good. And I think maybe that leads us into Joe's question. So Joe Grant posted, curious how you balance the concept of not burdening the users with data, but also giving the users the autonomy to discover trends naturally. Conscious that we consider ourselves the exclusive source of truth, then it's easy to see how a bias can be put in place from the dashboard providers. Essentially, what does the ONS do to curate data, but still prevent data selection bias via framing effects?
Mm. It's always it's a difficult line to walk. And I think we have to publish data in such a way that just caters for a lot of users and a lot of ways in which users would want to interact with it. And we can't do everything for everyone. So, just as long as our data is really accessible and our tables are really good, and hopefully, maybe we've even got APIs and sort of other ways of getting data to people. Our publications, that I've used the term already, but like a shop window, they kind of want to be a way into it, a way of understanding it, and a kind of, yeah, just what's interesting this quarter, or what's the most relevant. Um, I don't know really.
I don't.
It depends.
It depends. It's a good answer.
Yeah.
So I am going to, I've got one more question I'd like to draw your attention to, and ignore me while I squirrel away for the last minute or two and just put up some slides. But I want to look at Kevin's post, which is, Kevin says, does appealing really mean great need? Users will give a great number of sins as an overwhelming need for the information. Yes, to make sense. The question is not as cynical as it might seem, as I think there's an issue between dashboards that show regular data that tends to be ignored because nothing has changed, but then you have the 1 day in 100 or 1,000 when you need to grab users' attention, and attention has been depreciated by attention. So on that note, I am going to quickly open up some slides. I'll let you answer. I'll go and hide for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's, this comes back to like pruning and keeping our dashboards really focused and really curated, and only surfacing that data that we really need to surface at a given time, and affording ourselves the flexibility to do that. So if you're just the boy who cried wolf and you're just publishing everything everywhere all at once, that's not a healthy thing for your users. So yeah, maybe it's sort of, when the time comes where a bit of data is really meaningful and really important to surface, we can sort of give it its platform and draw attention to it, and not, kind of talk about it in a more focused way when it's important. But yeah, not publishing everything everywhere all at once is what I would say to that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, we're in the final minute, so this puts the pressure on me. Okay, Frank, thank you so much for a brilliant presentation and for so much richness in thoughts. And I think you're saying out loud things that probably everybody on this call has thought to themselves. So it's wonderful to be reassured of it. And so yeah, like so many things for me that were just, yeah, absolutely, that's what we should be aiming for.
Yes, thank you. That's pleasure.
It's been absolutely brilliant. So it'd be lovely to get a copy of the slides, and then we can share that with the group. And the video will be too. So those that want to go and ram this message home to your colleagues, then come and spread it wide, please. As I say, this is part of the public sector community, and we have 1,600 of us already now and continue to grow. So please, if you're not a member, do join, because that's where you'll see stuff published and get to hear first about what is going on. I have also, just out for people, because all the people here are interested in data visualization, there is actually the data visualization competition that Data Lab are running is still going. I think it's open until the 16th of January, and you can enter. You need to come up with a data visualization theme of climate action using data from the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. And there is a prize worth over £500. So how often do you get that in your public sector life, right? So let's, do sign up for that. We might not have time to put it in the chat, but it'll be coming out in emails, I'm sure. And we're on 12:50, so it's time to either go get your lunch, go to your next meeting, do whatever it is you have to do. We'll be back here on the 15th of January, where our theme will be about education and learning. Invites and web event page to sign up will be with you very soon also. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. And thank you again, Frank. It was brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
And Merry Christmas, everyone, because I won't see you till next year. Oh, thanks, Stephen, for putting that on.